Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase, because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host at Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Mitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
Welcome back to episode 124 of the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. We have with us the legendary Jesse Powell, CEO of Kraken. In May 2014, Telegraph reviewed about a dozen of the major exchanges. Kraken was ranked number 1.
It's the largest Euro Bitcoin exchange. And welcome to the podcast, Jesse.
Hey, thanks, Trace. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just to start off, you've been around Bitcoin for a long, long time. You've seen how many exchanges have problems. I mean, you've been intimately involved with a lot of these, cleaning up the messes in a lot of cases. We actually have very actionable information today. We've been busy all day. It's currently 1 o'clock in the morning. You got a 5 o'clock flight to catch to the Consumer Electronics Show. Mm-hmm. And this morning, right before all our meetings, Bitstamp lost 19,000 Bitcoins. Really? Not again. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with MtGox clear back in 2011 and, how that's led to this Kraken and getting the receivership from the Tokyo Bankruptcy Court? Let's kind of delve into all of that.
Yeah, sure. So, many people are probably already aware, and I've blogged about this, and the story's publicly known. I went out to Japan in June of 2011 to help MtGox through that hack that they had back then. It was the first hack that we're aware of. Spent about a week and a half out there helping them kind of get things in order. Came away from that with the realization that the Bitcoin exchange is probably the most critical piece of the ecosystem. It keeps everything moving. It keeps merchants able to take Bitcoin as payments. It keeps price discovery going. When MtGox had gone down, pretty much everything had ground to a halt. Like, nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew what the value of a Bitcoin was.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoins, they'd gone from like $1 to $32 in space of a few months, and then they eventually crashed all the way to $2 after this hack. I mean, yeah. It's the phrase getting goxed. It really attacks that first network effect of Bitcoin of speculation.
Yeah, definitely. So there's obviously huge counterparty risk with any exchange right now. And, some of the biggest traders we've spoken to have said that the counterparty risk is really the biggest threat to them. That's why they're worried about leaving a lot of money on the exchange. That's what's preventing them from making the order book more liquid.
And arbitrage and spreads and all of this comes down to, why pick up pennies in front of the bulldozer? Why try and pick up 5 or 10 basis points when you could lose 30% of your capital, when someone loses 200,000 or 800,000 Bitcoins or 20,000 Bitcoins or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. So you're sort of, like you said, risking your entire fortune for a few pennies. So what we would like to do in the long term is move to a fully multi-sig solution, so that even if Kraken is hacked somehow, that we don't have the ability to lose the coins because we've only got one of 3 keys, or one of some number of keys, and we don't have the ability to spend ourselves.
Yeah, and part of this, it's more complicated than just, having multi-sig implemented with what's currently out there. I know at Armory we're working on some very, serious enterprise level solutions that we can really kind of provide what Bitstamp or a Kraken would need in that regard. So, but the actual software, it hasn't really been built yet if somebody wants to accomplish that. And it's difficult stuff to build too. It's difficult software to build. The securities are a major issue. Yeah. We saw when Gox failed, they blamed it on transaction mailability. Mm-hmm. And around the same time, Gox halted because of this transaction mailability. Bitstamp halted trading, like some of the other exchanges halted trading. And I thought it was funny, like Kraken sent out a tweet, Kraken halts nothing because planning, carry on. And Kraken didn't halt trading. Like, I mean, why is that? These other exchanges halted. Like, why didn't you guys halt?
I mean, transaction malleability had been known. It was well documented, and we had just planned around it. I think some of the core developers, I don't remember if it was Gavin or Jeff or who it was, but described transaction malleability as sort of a feature, not a bug. It was known. You could work around it, and
or work with it.
Yeah, or work with it. You know, we had just planned for it, and so this is one of the risks in supporting coins that you haven't fully vetted or you don't fully understand the protocol. This is why Kraken is not very quick to add new coins. And it's just that you can overlook something like that. You botch your implementation somehow, you miss a detail, and you're affected by something like transaction malleability.
Yeah, so not really like Cryptsy or these other altcoin exchanges that just like throw anything on there. Like, in fact, I mean, you guys wanted to add Namecoin, which is, been around a long time. It's merged mined with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Tell us about what happened when you went to add Namecoin to Kraken.
Yeah, so I mean, even though Namecoin had been around for years at the point we added it, we still did our usual diligence on it, and we wanted to understand the protocol.
And when you say diligence, I mean, you're digging into the actual code of the protocol.
Yeah, no, that's just one piece of it. We obviously want to understand the protocol very well, but we also want to understand the development team, like whether this coin is going to be around in 6 months or whether it's a pump and dump or, whether there's some real value here to the coin. We obviously don't want to waste our development time on something that's going to be bad for our users to invest in, or it's going to be just abandoned shortly after. As part of that kind of comprehensive diligence process, we took a hard look at the protocol and discovered this critical flaw in the protocol. And that was that the enforcement of ownership of these, the .bit domains was not actually enforced at the protocol level. It was only being enforced on the client. So we ultimately reported that to the Namecoin dev team and worked with them to come up with a fix for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually several examples where you've done, critical service to Namecoin in this instance. What about like the whole auditing of reserve? Kraken was the first exchange to audit, produce what could be considered like a cryptographic proof of ownership or proof of reserves or proof of control. Like, could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so after Gox went down, there was this huge public outcry for exchanges to show proof of reserves. And as far as I'm aware, we're the first exchange to do it. This process wasn't invented by us, but I think Greg Maxwell was, to my knowledge, like the guy that came up with this process, which is sort of cryptographic proof using the Merkle tree, proved to every user that their balance was included in this total balance. So the way that we did it, two ways that it could have been done. One would have been to publish the total balance and publish the entire tree for everyone. We chose not to go that route because we felt that publishing the total balance was another sort of security compromise. Like, we didn't want to show hackers how much money there was there,
incentivize them to come and try and get it.
Exactly.
And it's also a trade secret. You don't want your competitors to know that information either.
Exactly. Yeah. So we felt that was giving away a lot, and we thought that we could find somebody trusted within the community to just sign off on that and to oversee the process. And so we got Stephen Thomas, who's one of the old school Bitcoiners who developed the WeUseCoins.com site and Bitcoin.js, and he's now the CTO of Ripple. So we had him, he's in San Francisco now, so we had him come by the office and do the audit for us. So everything checked out, and I think that went over really well with the community. It was a good kind of first run at it. We found some things that we could do better next time, and given light of recent events, it's probably about time to do it again. We'd wanted to do it much more frequently than we had, but it's a bit of a production finding somebody kind of qualified to actually sign off on it.
Yeah, and personally, I'd love to see 24/7 type audit happening, but you really do have to weigh kind of the cost and the benefit from it and things like that. I mean, I guess we could raise fees to be auditing on a 24/7 basis, but
we can do that internally. You can reconcile our own books internally, and that's not a problem. But
but we're talking about getting like a third party that's like trusted, that has other things to do and earns a lot of money.
Right, yeah. So to have a third party do it on a daily basis would be quite expensive. So the alternative, I guess, would be to publish the balance every time we do it and have it be automated completely. But again, like you said, it's revealing a lot of information we don't necessarily want to reveal. But that only solves kind of half of the problem, in that it solves having to trust the exchange, that they're telling you the truth about that they have your money. It doesn't solve a problem of them getting hacked. Like, it doesn't make them unhackable. So
yeah, because you could publish the results and 2 minutes later get hacked and like poof.
Exactly.
And it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. There are also some other flaws with the process. Like, we could have borrowed the coins while we did the audit, and then we could have given them back to whoever lent them to. So it's not totally foolproof, but at least that we had access to the coins at some point. So yeah, I think that the greatest solution is just the multi-sig setup, where the technology is not quite there yet to make it very easy on the consumer to do this. But there's some companies working on this. BitGo's working on it, and Crypto Corp is working on it, to be this sort of third-party signatory who can have one of 3 keys. And so the exchange would have a key, those guys would have a key, and then the user would have a key, and we would have a relationship with a third party that allows us to collect the Bitcoin when we need it. But if there's sort of like a burst of Bitcoin pulled, their velocity triggers would go off and they would stop us from taking too much money.
I was talking with Brian Donegan from the Isle of Man government, and we actually did a podcast interview with him. Perhaps having trust companies or law firms or, other escrow agents, people that are licensed, bonded, insured, things like that, to actually be some of these additional signers. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a Bitcoin specific company that does it. It could be the insurance company. There are lots of potential solutions. But like you said, the tech just isn't built yet. I mean, we have a lot of work to do over at Armory to build this foundational infrastructure in the wallet for this to be able to actually be implemented on a large enterprise and level scale.
Yeah.
Switching gears, what about this cryptocurrency bank, this Fedor relationship that you've got? Can you describe that a little bit? Because I think that's just a critical piece of what's going on here.
I had a relationship with Fedor for a bit over a year now, and things have gone really well. We've been really tight with them. We've kind of figured out what the risk model looks like and what the problems are in running an exchange or doing payments for Bitcoin related transactions, and sort of what sorts of problems other banks are going to have with it and regulators are going to have with it. Having all that behind us and having been able to kind of build out our infrastructure and our processes, Fedor is feeling comfortable now to try to open up their bank to other companies and other, just the Bitcoin user base as a whole, since banking has been such a huge problem for even individuals in the space, but even more so businesses. So rather than try to fit this project under the Fedor brand, they're interested in creating a cryptocurrency bank. So a separate bank under a separate brand that will have the mission of banking Bitcoin companies and Bitcoin users. So we just had a sort of a workshop brainstorming session in Berlin a couple weeks ago that went really well. We had a lot of participants from the Bitcoin business community there. Got a lot of good ideas, kind of got to understand the needs of other Bitcoin businesses and what features they'd like to see and how the bank could be most helpful to them.
Man, being such a good trailblazer, it's really, we've had a lot of our trailblazers that either completely abused their position, like MtGox and Corpelis and MyBitcoin.com and Bitcoinica and Intersango. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So it's good to see a trailblazer actually doing it the right way.
Thanks.
And a bank saying, hey, look, it's actually been a good experience. We're gonna work with other Bitcoin companies. I think that's great. We had the MtGox bankruptcy over in Japan, international news, and yet Kraken's going to be opening in Japan. Like, can you describe a little bit about like how has this happened?
Yeah, so we're already open. The Japanese government, surprisingly, has been very open and supportive of Bitcoin. And we found out that it was actually a Japanese politician, Fukuda, who was tasked with like figuring out what happened at Gox. And that was how he found out about Bitcoin. When he was researching it to understand the Gox case, just became enamored by it and thought it was such a great thing that he wanted Japan to have a bigger role in what was going on. So
great to make lemonade.
yeah, I mean, he was able to see past the whole Gox scenario and understand that Gox was not Bitcoin and that Bitcoin was this bigger thing and Gox was just one company. And so Japan has put this moratorium on their equivalent of the money transmission rules there. And it's sort of open season for Bitcoin companies in Japan right now. We've made our way into Japan. We've translated the site. We've got some Japanese support staff. The market there is still very small. I think probably many people that had been trading there are still feeling burnt by Gox. But, I think it's going to come around. Japan obviously is a huge player in the global economy, huge financial markets. So we're confident that is a market that can grow for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, that's just great. Not only have you trailblazed in all these places, but even in the destruction that Mt. Gox has left, like you've come in, been approved by the Tokyo government, by the Tokyo bankruptcy court, by the Tokyo bankruptcy trustee to handle the receivership of the hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. This is really quite a bit that's been accomplished. Like, why do you think they chose Kraken and not Bitfinex or Bitstamp or OKCoin or like 796.com? I mean, how many Kraken competitors can I list, right? Like BTC China. I mean, why they choose Kraken and not all these other potential players?
I think in large part it was due to our conservative approach to the business as a whole. And, many of the guys you've named have trailblazers, I would say, have also been corner cutters. They've kind of done things the fast and easy way to gain market share, to achieve revenue. We've always taken the cautious approach. There are plenty of guys out there doing it that way, and I'm glad that some guys are doing it that way because in many places they're doing it illegally, but somebody does need to serve that market, and I'm glad. The United States, for example, is a very tough market to service legally. So I'm glad that some people are able to service it illegally. It's not a risk that we're willing to take.
Yeah, so Kraken, I mean, you service, 5 states
right
in the U.S., but that's it.
But yeah, so just 5 states, and those are the states where we are able to service users legally. And a lot of people don't understand that it doesn't matter where your business is located. If you're taking a user in California or New York, you need to have a license in California or New York, even if your company's based in Japan
or Slovenia.
Yeah, or
Bitstamp.
Yeah. So these guys,
and I mean, what happens? Like, what could potentially happen here? And like, what about systemic risk? One of the biggest fears for traders.
Like I said, the counterparty risk is a huge thing for traders. For guys that have been operating illegally, sure, they've gained the market share by doing that, but I think they've exposed themselves to this huge risk that the United States government is going to come after them at some point.
Or one of the state governments.
Yeah, or one of the states.
And I mean, what can happen there? Like, what difference does that make?
The penalties are pretty extreme in the United States. It's something like $5,000 a day per user that you're servicing illegally, plus 5 years in prison. Plus, like, your investors are potentially on the hook as well for crime of operating an unlicensed money transmission business.
So, I mean, we're talking about, like, when you're dealing with this Mt. Gox bankruptcy, they seized $5 million in the Wells Fargo account in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
And, like, the Chapter 15 bankruptcy, like, are those funds, which could be customer funds, like, are they going to get rolled into the bankruptcy? I mean, like, that's what we're talking about here is, like, one of these illegally operating exchanges could be accruing these contingent liabilities that may eventually manifest themselves in terms of a fine. Yeah, guess where the funds are going to come to pay this fine? Guess where they're going to get seized from? Yeah, it's going to be customer accounts that are going to get seized, like what happened with Gox.
Yeah.
Potentially,
yeah. And then the customers will probably have to fight for getting their funds back because they know those funds did not belong to the exchange. They belong to the users. And so we need those funds back, and probably going to be a nightmare for everybody involved with that.
Yeah, and so Kraken, you just don't take that market share. You don't take those customers.
Yeah, so
it's a handicap, but it's
a huge handicap.
But it's a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
Very conservative strategy.
Right. And we feel that for the clients that are able to use our exchange, that we're able to service legally, we would be doing them a disservice by, on top of that, offering our service illegally to another set of users that creates a risk for these guys that we are servicing legally.
Now, where there's a will, there's a way, though, right? Like, there's five states that you can take full boarded customers from.
Right.
Like, what are the 5 states again?
They are Alabama, South Carolina, Montana, New Mexico, and Massachusetts.
Okay. One of the blogs I operate, howtovanish.com, we actually write a lot about New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And, you do a lot of work with institutions or entities, right? So, like, corporations and LLCs can have accounts at Kraken. Mm-hmm. So, like, New Mexico is actually one of the ones I talk about on this How to Vanish. Like, if you go to howtovanish.com/NM, like New Mexico, NM LLC, it'll forward to the article or whatever. Like, New Mexico, you can get an LLC for $50, and it's a perpetual registration, good for like 99 years. Like, if somebody really, really wanted a Kraken account, like super bad, and they were willing to like go get a New Mexico LLC and have a registered agent in New Mexico, could they then open their Kraken account with this New Mexico LLC?
Yeah, there would be nothing preventing us from servicing a New Mexico entity. So they would be able to trade through that entity in New Mexico or in any one of the other 4 states we're able to service, or in any entity abroad.
Yeah, so they could have a Hong Kong entity or something, that they could also trade through. But, New Mexico LLC with a registered agent, that could be a potentially pretty cheap way to be able to avail oneself legally compliant manner with Kraken.
Yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way. Yeah, so like what are some other things that might be actionable for the audience to do? One thing I've noticed with Kraken, there's a lot of, you could say, security features that are like Easter eggs. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about some of these? Like, because a lot of people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know that they don't know it. So like, what are some of these security features that are there for the very security conscious that the person just might not be aware of?
Yeah, some of the stuff you need to dig for, kind of advanced settings. PGP encrypted email is available, so all the automatic updates that you get from the exchange, from password reset emails to trade notifications to funding address changes, you can have all these emails encrypted when they go out to you.
Now, what could be an advantage of that?
Well, let's say somebody manages to compromise your email account. They make an attempt to reset your password. Well, if you had 2-factor on there, they probably wouldn't be able to do it. But if let's say you didn't have 2-factor on your account, and they tried to reset your password by sending a recovery email to your email account. Well, if your email was encrypted, they wouldn't be able to decrypt that email to see how to recover the account. So they would also have to compromise your machine or your
private key for your GPG.
Right.
And like trade notifications, like if they compromise your email account and they see that you like withdrew 1,000 Bitcoins from Coinbase, and it comes from Coinbase in like this open email, and man, they know you're sitting on some cash, and they know the address.
Now
they
know to dig a little deeper, or just like sit on your account for a while, try not to let you know that they're there, and wait for you to expose those coins to them. So
I mean, that's just like a kind of a PGP. You're just setting up this additional barrier for anyone who's like fortunate enough to like hack your email.
Or who happens to work at the email provider that just likes to snoop around.
Coinbase or Kraken could even have malicious customer service employees or something,
Sure.
I mean, like this helps protect against so many different potential security vulnerabilities.
Yeah. So I would highly recommend anybody using the exchange to just use PGP for email, period, for everything, for all email. I mean, I try to use it as much as possible for everything. And it's not too hard to do. I think Gmail actually just released some sort of plugin. I haven't tried it myself yet, but it's some Chrome plugin for doing a PGP email through the Gmail web client. If you're using just a desktop client, you can use Enigmail, works with Thunderbird, and there's also I think GPG Tools comes with some sort of plugin for Outlook or for Mail.
And there's also Mailvelope, which is a Chrome plugin also that's fairly easy to use. GPG's just been very clumsy. It'd be great if there were like a bit message integration, because then we wouldn't even have metadata. You know?
That's
like
a good idea.
no one would know you even had a Kraken account by going through your
Right.
email, because you're getting it via bit message. But that's a lot more developer time to probably get it implemented.
That would be cool.
So it makes it hard. It makes it hard for someone to fish for Kraken accounts, right?
Right. So yeah, obviously if you have PGP email on your Kraken account, if you get an email that's not encrypted, that it's obviously not from us. That would weed out a lot of phishing attempts there.
Yeah. So we got PGP email. You talked about two-factor authentication.
Two-factor, yeah. So two-factor allows you to use a second device to log in, like something separate from your main machine. So you can use what's called Google Authenticator to, like on your phone, to generate a second sort of one-time use password that you use when logging in, so that even if somebody were able to compromise your username and password, they wouldn't ever get this one-time use code unless they somehow also acquired your cell phone. So it's just a second device. So you need to compromise both to actually compromise an account. So that's huge, and everybody should have that on their account, both for logging in and for making withdrawals.
What about the master lock?
Yeah, so the master lock.
Maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a feature that isn't used enough. It's a little hard to find, but it's in the settings, and it basically allows you to lock down your account. So if, say, you're going out of town, or you think you're going to be using it from a computer that you don't trust entirely, you can completely lock down a whole set of features on your account, and you can set a timer on it so that it'll unlock after X number of days. Yeah. So if you wanted to be totally sure that nobody's going to get into your account while you're off the grid on Safari for 2 weeks, then you could.
Which you just finished.
Which I just did. Yeah, actually, I managed to go off the grid for a week on Safari, which was totally awesome.
See any big game?
Yeah, we
saw Mark Capella somewhere.
Did not catch Mark on the Safari. We have to take the Japanese Safari for that one.
We need him over the fireplace, A
trophy.
It's all fun and games until somebody loses 700,000 bitcoins.
Yeah, it's just insanity. It's just hard to believe that happened. Actually, we don't know for sure that happened, because we don't know if we can trust the database that we've got.
It could be 1 million bitcoins that are lost.
Could be 1 million,
1,000? I mean, it's
exactly, yeah. So we don't
crazy.
know. I suspect that not all the claims will be approved. I'm sure Mark has a claim of his own.
200,000, I think.
No, I think he's got a balance on MtGox on his own personal account. He'll probably make a claim. Whether that claim will be approved or not is yet to be seen. But I think there may be several users on the exchange if Gox was actually hacked, and there may be some inflated balances that don't get paid out, or there may be some guys who had money from their Silk Road activity that have just decided it's better to let it go than to risk going to prison.
Well, what's going to happen? Like, let's say that there's 650,000 of customer balances, but only 325,000 get claimed. What happens? So what happens in that case?
It's all going to go pro rata to the guys who have the claims. So
if you claim, you're going to get more.
Yeah. So the people that claim will get back more if there are people that don't submit their claims or whose claims are rejected.
And how is this claims process going to work? Like, everybody's going to come create a Kraken account, has to get it verified. How's this work?
Yeah. So we're still working through that process with the bankruptcy trustee, but I think the fastest way for people to do it will be, and we hope this is what ends up happening, through Kraken. If you have a Kraken account, you'll be able to just click a link to submit your Gox claim. You'll put in your Gox credentials. You'll see the last known balance that you had. You'll say, I agree to this or not. If you agree, your claim's submitted. If you don't agree, then you tell us what you think you had. I think we're going to be asking for some substantiating information, like if you happen to have records of any transactions to or from Gox, like on the blockchain, that you can show us, provide the transaction IDs.
Or maybe wire transfer instructions.
Right. So that kind of stuff would be helpful in the event that there's
printed
any sort
account
of
histories.
dispute. The trustee is going to look at all the claims and decide which ones to pay out or which ones need more information. Sometime probably around September, payouts will be made.
Now, we're dealing with 100, Gox had over 1 million accounts, right? I mean,
over 1 million
how
accounts.
many claims are we talking about here?
I think there's something like 127,000 funded accounts left. So that's potentially how many claims there are.
Wow, people better get their Kraken account created. I mean, you guys are gonna have a lot of work to do, like getting these all AML KYC verified and like all this work.
Yeah, it is going to be a lot of work to do. So
better get your account set up quick. You know.
Yeah, definitely having an account already and having the being at tier 3 with your documents already submitted will make things a lot easier. The more people that have done that in advance, the faster the process can go. But if people absolutely don't want to do that, then there will be another alternative method for people to submit their claim, and there will be another way for people to receive their payouts, albeit
carrier pigeons,
slower. Yeah, probably
across the Pacific.
A check by mail. After a lot of fees are taken out for
mailing and postage.
Paying like 10 lawyers to put the stamp on the envelope.
On it. Yeah.
So our goal is to try to get everyone paid back in as much Bitcoin as possible, because that's obviously
and as quickly as possible.
The most efficient way to get the money back to people. I'm sure guys with balances of like $10, if you're like in Australia, by the time you pay your $50 wire fee to get it from Japan to Australia, you got nothing left. So
man, it's time to go to sleep. You got a flight to catch in like 3 hours.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thanks so much for taking the time to give us this update, especially at this critical time as Bitstamps lost like 19,000 Bitcoins. And it's nice to know that there's an exchange out there where people the Tokyo bankruptcy court that's handling this MtGox failure has confidence and faith and trust in how you're running the shop there.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see position and our strategy kind of pay off, because it's not very clear in the short term that taking the very conservative approach is the right way to go for the business. But in the long run, I think guys like Fedor Bank and the Japanese bankruptcy trustee really appreciate the approach that we've taken to compliance and to security and all that stuff. And so while it means more friction for the users right now, I think for the users we do service, it makes for a better experience, reduces the counterparty risk, and obviously it opens this up for opportunities like helping Fedor with the cryptocurrency bank, helping with the MtGox liquidation.
Well, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Totally.
So we've had the legendary Jesse Powell, CEO of Kraken. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tracy.
Be sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.